A TSA agent grabbed my arm at the security checkpoint and whispered 4 words that made my blood run cold. "Someone tampered with your bag." I was standing in line at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, waiting to go through security like I had done hundreds of times before. It was a Sunday morning, and the terminal was crowded with families heading home from weekend trips and business travelers like me trying to get back before Monday meetings. I had my carry-on bag on my shoulder, my boarding pass pulled up on my phone, and my mind already on the work waiting for me when I landed in Atlanta. Then a man in a TSA uniform stepped directly in front of me. He was maybe 40 years old, tall, with a serious face and calm eyes that scanned the crowd behind me like he was looking for someone specific. I thought he was going to ask me to step into a different line or show additional ID. Instead, he leaned in close, so close I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Don't react," he said quietly. "Don't turn around. Someone put something in your bag. Come with me. Now." I opened my mouth to ask what he was talking about, but he shook his head slightly. The look in his eyes told me this was not a conversation. This was an order. He placed his hand on my elbow and guided me out of line, through a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," and into a long hallway I didn't know existed. Another agent was waiting there, a woman with gloves already on her hands. She took my bag without a word. They brought me to a small room with no windows, just a metal table and 2 chairs under harsh fluorescent lights. The female agent placed my bag on the table and began going through it, removing my clothes, my laptop, my toiletries, everything I had packed the night before. I watched, confused and terrified, as her gloved fingers moved along the inside lining of the bag. Then she stopped. Her hand found something near the bottom, hidden against the fabric. She pulled out a sealed plastic package, about the size of a paperback book, taped flat to the inside of the lining where I never would have noticed it. I had never seen that package before in my life. They tested it right there in front of me. The white powder inside came back positive for cocaine, almost 200 grams, enough to trigger federal trafficking charges, enough to send me to prison for 15 years or more. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare at that package and wonder who had done this to me, who had put drugs in my bag, who wanted me to get caught, and why. The TSA agent who had pulled me out of line was standing near the door. He looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "Someone called in a tip about you 30 minutes ago," he said. "They described exactly what you were wearing. They knew what your bag looked like. Whoever did this wanted you to be stopped." In that moment, I realized that this wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. Someone I knew had set me up, and if that agent hadn't pulled me out of line, I would have walked right into the trap. Subscribe for more stories and tell me where you're watching from. My name is Nadia Okonkwo. I'm 29 years old, and until that morning at the airport, I thought I had my life figured out. I work as a pharmaceutical sales representative for a company based in Atlanta, Georgia. My job is to travel around the country meeting with doctors, hospital administrators, and clinic managers to discuss new medications and treatment options. It sounds glamorous, but mostly it means living out of a suitcase, eating airport food, and spending more time in hotel rooms than in my own apartment. I've gotten used to it over the 5 years I've been doing this job. Some weeks, I visit 3 or 4 different cities. I know the layouts of airports better than I know my own neighborhood. I'm the oldest of 3 children. My mother, Grace, is a retired school teacher who still wakes up at 6 every morning out of habit. She calls me every day no matter where I am, asking if I've eaten, if I'm getting enough sleep, if I'm remembering to take my vitamins. My father, Samuel, passed away 4 years ago from a heart attack. It happened suddenly, without warning. One day he was healthy and laughing at the dinner table, and the next day he was gone. His death changed our family in ways I'm still processing. It made us closer, more protective of each other, more aware of how quickly everything can fall apart. My younger brother, Kofi, is 26 and works as an electrician in Detroit. He's quiet and steady, the kind of person who shows up without being asked and fixes problems without making a fuss. My youngest sibling, Adaze, is 23 and finishing her nursing degree in Atlanta. She lives with our mother to save money, and the two of them have become inseparable, since my father died. I had been dating a man named Victor Sands for 11 months when everything fell apart. We met at a pharmaceutical conference in Dallas. He worked as a sales rep for a competing company, and we spent an entire evening at the hotel bar complaining about the same things: the endless travel, the demanding clients, the pressure to hit impossible sales targets. He was charming and funny and seemed to understand my life in a way that most men I dated never did. By the end of that trip, we had exchanged numbers. A month later, we were officially together. 6 months before the airport incident, Victor moved into my apartment in Atlanta. It felt fast, but everything with him felt right. He was easy to live with. He cooked dinner when I came home exhausted from trips. He remembered small details about my day and asked follow-up questions. My mother liked him. Adez thought he was handsome. I started imagining a future with him, maybe marriage, maybe kids someday. The week before everything changed, I attended a 3-day pharmaceutical industry conference in Chicago. Victor was supposed to come with me. He had clients in the area, and we had planned to extend the trip by a day, maybe see some of the city together. But 2 days before we were supposed to leave, he called me and said something had come up at work, a last-minute meeting he couldn't reschedule. He was sorry. He would make it up to me. I was disappointed, but I understood. Our jobs were demanding. Things like this happened all the time. So I went to Chicago alone. I stayed at the conference hotel, attended seminars during the day, and went to networking dinners in the evening. I kept my bag in my room, locked and secure. I didn't share my space with anyone. I didn't think anything unusual was happening. The night before my flight home, I went to a dinner at a restaurant downtown with other people from the conference. I was gone for about 3 hours. When I came back to my hotel room, everything looked exactly the way I had left it. The door was locked. My bag was in the closet. Nothing seemed out of place. I went to bed early, set my alarm, and woke up the next morning ready to fly home. I double-checked my bag to make sure I had everything. I took a taxi to O'Hare. I got in line for security, and then a TSA agent grabbed my arm and told me someone had tampered with my bag. I didn't know it yet, but someone had been in my hotel room while I was at dinner. Someone had hidden almost 200 grams of cocaine inside my carry-on, and someone had called in an anonymous tip to make sure I would be caught before I ever boarded my flight. Someone who knew my travel schedule, someone who had a key to my room, someone I trusted completely. I just couldn't see it yet. The female TSA agent sealed the package in an evidence bag and left the room without saying a word. I sat alone at that metal table for what felt like hours, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what was happening. My mind kept circling back to the same impossible question. How did cocaine end up in my bag? I didn't use drugs. I had never used drugs. I didn't know anyone who dealt drugs, at least not that I was aware of. My life was boring in the most ordinary way. I went to work, I visited my family, I came home to my boyfriend and watched TV on the couch. There was nothing about me that should have attracted this kind of attention. When the door finally opened again, a man in a dark suit walked in. He was Hispanic, maybe mid-40s, with short graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a person could tell. He sat down across from me and placed a badge on the table. "I'm Special Agent Torres with the DEA," he said. "I need to ask you some questions about the package found in your bag." I told him everything I could think of. I explained my job, my travel schedule, the conference I had just attended. I told him about the hotel, the dinner the night before, the fact that my bag had been in my room the entire time. I swore to him that I had never seen that package before, that I had no idea how it got inside my bag, that someone must have put it there without my knowledge. Agent Torres listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied me for a long moment. "Miss Okonkwo, the amount of cocaine found in your bag is enough to trigger federal trafficking charges. We're talking a minimum of 15 years in prison. If you were caught crossing state lines, which you were about to do, that number goes up." I felt like the floor was dropping out from under me. 15 years. My entire life, gone, for something I didn't do. "I didn't put that there," I said. My voice was shaking. "You have to believe me. Someone set me up. That's what everyone says." His tone wasn't cruel, just tired, like he had heard this exact story 1,000 times before. Then he told me something that changed everything. We received an anonymous tip about you 30 minutes before you reached the checkpoint. A male caller described you in detail. Your height, your hair, the red scarf you're wearing, the exact model and color of your carry-on bag. He said you were a drug mule making a delivery to Atlanta and that you needed to be stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. Someone called in a tip about me specifically? Yes. And they knew things that a stranger wouldn't know. Personal details. My mind started racing. Who knew I was traveling today? Who knew what I would be wearing? Who knew what my bag looked like? My family knew my schedule, but they wouldn't have known what I was wearing at the airport. My coworkers knew I was at the conference, but none of them had seen me that morning. There was only one person who knew all of those details. One person who had been in my apartment when I packed my bag. One person who had canceled his trip to Chicago at the last minute, leaving me to travel alone. Victor, tell me about your personal relationships, Agent Torres said, as if reading my thoughts. Is there anyone who might have access to your belongings? Anyone who knew your travel plans in detail? I hesitated. The words felt impossible to say out loud, but I forced myself to answer honestly. My boyfriend, Victor Sands. He was supposed to come to Chicago with me, but he canceled 2 days before. He has a key to my apartment. He knew exactly when I was flying, which hotel I was staying at, everything. Agent Torres wrote something in his notebook. Did he have access to your hotel room? He had a key card. The hotel issued 2 when I checked in because he was supposed to join me. When he canceled, I didn't think to return the extra one. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Victor could have been in Chicago without me knowing. He could have come to my hotel while I was at dinner. He could have walked right into my room, planted the drugs, and left before I got back. Then he could have called in the tip to make sure I would be caught. But why? Why would the man I loved, the man I was building a life with, want to send me to prison? Agent Torres seemed to sense my confusion. Miss Okonkwo, in my experience, people don't frame someone for drug trafficking without a reason. There's usually money involved, or debt, or both. I thought about Victor, his expensive taste in clothes, the new car he had bought a few months ago, the way he sometimes got tense phone calls that he would take in another room. I had noticed these things, but I had never questioned them. Now I was questioning everything. If your boyfriend is involved in something, Agent Torres said, we need to find out what, and I think you might be the only person who can help us do that. For hours, I refused to believe it. Even with all the evidence pointing at Victor, some part of me kept searching for another explanation. Maybe someone stole his key card. Maybe he told someone else about my travel plans. Maybe this was all a terrible coincidence that would make sense once I had more information. But Agent Torres kept laying out facts that made denial impossible. The anonymous tip had come from a burner phone, a cheap prepaid device purchased with cash at a convenience store in Atlanta 3 days before the conference. The store's security camera captured a man matching Victor's height and build making the purchase, though his face was turned away from the lens. The caller had known details about me that only someone close would know. My middle name, the red scarf I always wore when traveling because my mother gave it to me, the exact make and model of my carry-on bag, a silver Samsonite with a small scratch near the zipper. These aren't things a stranger would know, Agent Torres said. Whoever made that call knows you intimately. They've been in your home. They've watched your habits. They know your routines. I sat there in that windowless room, feeling my entire relationship with Victor unravel in my mind. Every sweet moment, every kind gesture, every time he told me he loved me, all of it now seemed tainted with doubt. Had any of it been real? Or had I just been useful to him from the very beginning? Why would he do this? I asked. My voice sounded hollow, like it belonged to someone else. What could he possibly gain from sending me to prison? Agent Torres leaned forward. That's what we need to find out, and I think you can help us. He explained my options. I could continue to maintain my innocence and face charges based on the physical evidence. A jury would hear that almost 200 grams of cocaine was found in my bag, hidden in a way that suggested intent to transport. Even with a good lawyer, the odds weren't in my favor. Or I could cooperate, help them understand who might have set me up, provide information about Victor, his contacts, his behavior. If I was telling the truth about being framed, working with the DEA was my best chance at proving it. The choice should have been obvious, but agreeing to cooperate meant accepting something I wasn't ready to accept. It meant admitting that the man I loved, the man I had imagined spending my life with, had tried to destroy me. I closed my eyes and thought about my mother. I thought about Kofi and a daze. I thought about what it would do to them if I went to prison for 15 years for something I didn't do. I thought about sitting in a cell, knowing that Victor was free, knowing that he had gotten away with it. When I opened my eyes, I looked at Agent Torres and said, "What do you need me to do?" The first step was simple. They gave me back my phone and told me to contact Victor normally, to see how he reacted when I mentioned what happened at the airport. I called him and said I had missed my flight because of a security delay. I didn't give details. I just told him I would be on a later flight and asked if he could pick me up. His response was strange. He didn't ask what kind of security delay. He didn't ask if I was okay or if something had happened. He just said, "No problem. Text me when you land." That was it. No concern, no curiosity, just calm acceptance, like he already knew exactly what had happened. Agent Torres had been listening on another line. When I hung up, he nodded slowly. That's not how an innocent person reacts when their girlfriend tells them she had a problem at airport security. He was right. If Victor had nothing to hide, he would have asked questions. He would have worried. Instead, he sounded like someone who was waiting for a specific outcome and had just received confirmation that it was happening. "We need more," Agent Torres said. "We need him to say something incriminating, something that proves he was involved." He asked if I was willing to wear a wire when I saw Victor, a small recording device hidden under my clothes that would capture everything he said. If Victor confessed, or even hinted at his involvement, it would be enough to arrest him and clear my name. The thought of facing Victor while hiding a microphone made me feel sick, but the thought of going to prison for his crime made me feel worse. "I'll do it," I said. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove the truth." Agent Torres handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying. "We'll be with you every step of the way," he said. "You won't be alone in this." I wiped my eyes and nodded. The man I thought I knew was about to find out that I was done being his victim. I flew home to Atlanta the next day wearing a small recording device taped to my chest beneath my shirt. Agent Torres and his team had spent an hour showing me how it worked, testing the audio quality, making sure it was completely hidden. They told me to act normal, to let Victor lead the conversation, and to push gently if he seemed willing to talk. They would be listening from a van parked outside my apartment complex. If anything went wrong, they would be inside within seconds. None of that made me feel less terrified. Victor picked me up from the airport like nothing was wrong. He was waiting at the curb in his new car, smiling when he saw me walking out of the terminal. He got out and hugged me, and I forced myself to hug him back even though my skin crawled at his touch. "How was the flight?" he asked, taking my bag and putting it in the trunk. "Long," I said. "I'm exhausted. I bet. That security delay must have been stressful." He said it casually, like he was making small talk, but I noticed he didn't ask what the delay was about. He didn't seem curious at all. We drove home through evening traffic, making conversation about nothing important. He talked about work, about a client who was giving him trouble, about a restaurant he wanted to try next weekend. I listened and nodded and gave short answers, playing the role of a tired girlfriend who just wanted to get home. Inside, I was watching every expression on his face, analyzing every word he said, searching for cracks in his performance. When we got to the apartment, I waited until we were both sitting on the couch before I brought it up. I had rehearsed this moment in my head a dozen times, but now that it was happening, my heart was pounding so hard I was afraid he could hear it. "Something happened at the airport," I said. "Something serious." Victor turned to look at me, his face arranged in an expression of concern. "What do you mean?" "TSA pulled me out of line. They found drugs in my bag, almost 200 grams of cocaine hidden in the lining." I watched his reaction carefully. His eyebrows rose. His mouth opened slightly. He leaned forward like he was shocked. "That's insane," he said. "How did that happen? Did someone at the conference mess with your stuff?" It was a good performance, almost convincing, but there was something missing behind his eyes. The surprise looked rehearsed, like he had practiced it in front of a mirror. "They got an anonymous tip," I said. "Someone called TSA and told them exactly what I was wearing, what my bag looked like, everything. They knew details that only someone close to me would know." For just a second, something flickered across Victor's face. It was there and gone so fast I almost missed it. Fear, guilt, the look of a man who realizes he might have made a mistake. "That's terrifying," he said, recovering quickly. "Who would do something like that?" I let the silence stretch between us. Then I told him what Agent Torres had told me. The burner phone purchased in Atlanta, the specific details in the call, the timing that matched perfectly with his canceled trip. "The DEA thinks whoever did this had access to my hotel room," I said. "They think it was someone who knew my schedule, someone who had a key card." Victor's expression hardened. "What are you saying, Nadia?" "I'm asking you, Victor. Did you do this?" He stood up from the couch, his body tense. "You can't be serious. You think I would plant drugs in your bag? You think I would try to send you to prison? I don't know what to think anymore. You're the only person who had all the information. You're the only one who makes sense. This is ridiculous." His voice was rising now. "I love you. Why would I do something like that?" I stood up too, facing him across the living room. "Then explain it to me. Help me understand how this happened." And then Victor made a mistake. Instead of continuing to deny it, instead of getting angry and defensive, he let out a long breath and sat back down. His whole body seemed to deflate. "You have no idea what kind of pressure I'm under," he said quietly. I stayed standing, my arms crossed over my chest, waiting. "I owe people money, Nadia. Serious money. The kind of people who don't accept payment plans. They said if I helped them move product, my debt would be cleared. All I had to do was find someone clean, someone who would never be suspected." He looked up at me, and his eyes were cold now. The mask was completely gone. "You were perfect. Traveling all the time, going through airports every week. If you got caught, it would look like you were working alone. No connection to me." My voice came out as a whisper. "You were going to let me go to prison. I didn't have a choice." Those 5 words hung in the air between us. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Agent Torres and his team were already moving. The door burst open, and Victor's face went white. The DEA agents swarmed into my apartment before Victor could move. They pushed him face down onto the floor and handcuffed his wrists behind his back, while he shouted that this was a mistake, that he wanted a lawyer, that I had set him up. I stood against the wall and watched, my whole body shaking, as the man I had loved was dragged out of our home in handcuffs. Agent Torres stayed behind for a moment. He removed the recording device from under my shirt and placed it in an evidence bag. "You did good," he said. "That confession is exactly what we needed." I nodded, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't feel anything except a hollow emptiness where my heart used to be. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of what Victor had been hiding. He wasn't just in debt to drug dealers. He was one of them. For over a year, he had been using his job in pharmaceutical sales as cover to transport cocaine across state lines. He would visit clients in different cities and make deliveries while he was there. His company had no idea. Neither did I. When his debts grew too large and his suppliers started threatening him, he needed a way out. That's when he came up with the plan to use me, a clean, successful woman with no criminal record who traveled constantly for work. If I got caught with drugs in my bag, I would take the fall. The attention would shift to me, and Victor would slip away unnoticed. He had been planning it for months. He moved into my apartment specifically to learn my routines. He accompanied me on trips to study how I packed, where I kept my bag, what security looked like at different airports. The relationship was never real. I was just a target he needed to get close to. Learning that was harder than I expected. The betrayal from the drugs was painful, but the betrayal of the relationship cut deeper. Every memory I had with Victor was now poisoned. Every moment I thought was genuine had been calculated. I had slept next to a man who was planning to destroy my life, and I never saw it coming. All charges against me were dropped within 2 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording of Victor's confession, combined with the physical evidence and the DEA's investigation into his network, proved beyond any doubt that I was innocent. Agent Torres called me personally to deliver the news. "It's over," he said. "You're free." I thanked him, but the word free didn't feel accurate. I was clear of criminal charges, but I wasn't free from what had happened. I wasn't free from the nightmares or the paranoia or the constant feeling that I couldn't trust anyone. My mother flew to Atlanta the day after Victor's arrest. She walked into my apartment, took one look at me, and pulled me into her arms without saying a word. I cried against her shoulder like I was a child again, letting out everything I had been holding inside since that TSA agent grabbed my arm at the airport. "You're safe now," she said. "That's all that matters." Kofi drove down from Detroit that weekend. Adaz took time off from nursing school. My family surrounded me the same way they had when my father died, with quiet presence and unconditional love. They didn't push me to talk about what happened. They just made sure I knew I wasn't alone. I started seeing a therapist a few weeks later. She helped me understand that what Victor did said nothing about me and everything about him. I wasn't foolish for trusting him. I was targeted because I was kind and open and assumed the best in people. Those qualities aren't weaknesses, even if someone exploited them. Victor was eventually sentenced to 14 years in federal prison on charges of drug trafficking, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to see his face again. I had already said everything I needed to say when I watched the agents take him away. I still work in pharmaceutical sales. I still travel constantly. But I do things differently now. I'm more careful about who I let into my life. I pay attention to small details that feel off, and I never ignore the voice in my head that tells me something is wrong. I think about that TSA agent sometimes, the one who pulled me out of line instead of letting me walk through security and get arrested on the other side. He didn't have to warn me. He could have followed protocol and let the situation play out. But he chose to give me a chance to understand what was happening before it was too late. I never got his name. I never got to thank him properly. But I hope he knows that his decision changed my life. Because of him, I had time to process what was happening. Because of him, I was able to cooperate with the investigation instead of being treated like a criminal from the start. Because of him, I caught Victor before he could disappear. The people who save you aren't always the ones you expect. Sometimes they're strangers doing their jobs who decide to show a little extra kindness. And sometimes that kindness makes all the difference in the world. I learned something important through all of this. The people who want to hurt you can wear the most familiar faces. They can share your home, your bed, your future plans. They can look you in the eyes and tell you they love you while plotting your destruction. But they don't get to win. Not if you're paying attention. Not if you're willing to fight back. Victor thought he knew me. He thought I would be the perfect victim because I was trusting and kind. But he underestimated what I was capable of when everything I loved was on the line. He won't make that mistake again. If you want more stories, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from.